So last weekend, when I was swapping out my brake pads for some new fresh ones, I was actually listening to the Cycling Tips podcast, and they were covering the same kind of topic about noisy disc brakes. And I think I've been pretty lucky when it comes to noisy brakes because I haven't really had much trouble with that. I don't really ride in really shitty weather. That could definitely be one reason for that, but I think I have developed a pretty nice system now to ensure that I am as noise-free as possible. Also, in that podcast, I will leave a link down below, by the way. They discussed a lot of interesting topics like brake compounds and bedding in, how important it really is. So that made me think I should actually do a video on this, more specifically how I break in my pads. And I can assure you, breaking in pads is just about as important as they discussed in this podcast. I put in new pads before that I didn't really bother breaking in that thoroughly. Just do some quick brakes at stoplights, etc. And the lifespan of those pads were definitely a lot worse than the ones I've been breaking in a lot more thoroughly. Before I head out on the bike and do that breaking in process, there's two more steps I always do now that I realized have really helped me avoiding noise and keeping the pad life as long as possible. The first one is when I change my pads, I make sure I clean the rotors thoroughly. I usually always clean them the last step when I actually wash my bike, just with soapy water. But when I change pads, I make sure I use alcohol, or in this case, it was nail polish remover. I just scrub the surface of the rotors. Here I try to use my newly found favorites, my Scott Shop paper towels. I don't really recommend that, as you can see. I'd rather use some kind of cloth instead of paper towels. Anyway, once you get those clean, the next step I will do before putting in the new pads is to clean the pistons. I've done a separate video on cleaning the pistons before, so I will link to that. But just in short, before you push the pistons in, make sure they are clean and lubed up with the same brake fluid that you have in your system. So in case of Shimano, you use mineral oil, and in case of SRAM, you use DOT fluid. But once those parts are done, we can head out on the road and I will show you how I bed in my brakes. Alright, so I will first start by finding a long stretch of road where I know I don't have to do any emergency braking, because the last thing I want to do is to lock up the brakes. So I will start at a slow speed, about 15 km an hour, and I will do both brakes individually. Then I will move up to about 30 km an hour and do the same thing, both brakes individually. And then I will try to find a downhill and do some more heavy braking for the last part. I will start at 15 km an hour. You don't need to be super picky. I always grab my rear brake and brake firmly, but not too much, so you lock up your brake. So the speed goes down to about walking speed, or 4 km an hour or something like that. Then I will repeat this 8 or 10 times for each brake. Going a bit too fast. And then just repeat this process for each of the brakes. Like I said, about 8 or 10 times. It's not the end of the world if you go a bit over 15 km an hour. Like I said, make sure you avoid locking up the brake when the brake pads are new. I think I have a tailwind, that's why it's so easy to go over. When you do this, you usually feel the braking power increase for every time you do it, so you might need to adjust your power on the brake lever so you don't lock up the brake by mistake. I can already feel my brakes starting to bite a lot more than the first time. totally forgot to count how many times I did this now, but it's not the end of the world to do one more than necessary. So after around 8, 10 or something like that, switch over to the other brake and just do the same procedure all over again. After doing one brake 10 times, the other brake don't bite nearly as good as the first one. If you're wondering why my speed is not updating so fast, I'm only using GPS. I don't have a speed sensor, so that's why. I will now go back to my rear brake, increase the speed to 30 km an hour, and then brake down to walking speed again. And again. Definitely would have been a good idea to have a speed sensor on the bike. Now the GPS is a bit laggy in updating the speed, but like I said, don't need to be that picky. This is a good workout as well. Combine it with some intervals. Not my cup of tea though. I'm tired. Well, I don't know if that was 10 or not, but the braking power has definitely increased and I'm pretty satisfied with riding like this from now on. I will do one more thing, and that's go up a hill, get some more speed in, use both brakes to do the same kind of drill as I just did, with the exception is the speed is higher and I will use both brakes at the same time. Maybe 3 or 4 times, and that should be it. So now I just need to find a small hill to do this on. Only problem with doing this part is you have to climb up the damn hill as well. But all good in the hood. Always fun to descend. Just need to gain some speed, and then I will use both brakes to brake down to an walking pace speed. I should mention, if you're on a road like this with traffic on it, definitely make sure it's all clear behind you before you start braking. Don't want to cause any accidents. Watch out for cars. Now, they're biting perfect. So I think that's it. So I'm pretty happy with that process. Brakes feels really nice right now. Of course, there's a lot of other ways to do this, like doing everything on downhill. If you have a specific method that works really good for you, definitely leave it down in the comments. Always good to have fresh takes on different methods. As usual, if you found this interesting or helpful, feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you feel like it. It's always appreciated. And I will catch you in the next one. Peace.